the 20 and the 10, and look at that, he hurdles his way into the...
Hello, everybody. Welcome to your Monday edition of Shanalytics. It's Ben and Vinny, of course. We're coming to you every Monday from mine and Vinny's channel. If you haven't already, make sure you go check out all of Vinny's content. It's all in the link below, or in the description below. You can check out the links to his YouTube, his Twitter. Vinny, how are you doing on this Victory Monday? It's a win for the 49ers, 33-22 over the Bears. It's a good day.
Yeah, it definitely is. And thanks for having me back on. Shout out to Marco Martinez, who came on last week. That was really fun talking with him. But yeah, dude, I'm in a good mood. I'm wearing my Jimmy jersey today. I think it's deserved. I thought he played really well yesterday. And I know it's we've been talking about it all off season and already, but I don't know if it's gonna happen, but there's very much a possibility that could be the last game we see Jimmy Garoppolo as a 49er. So,
that's something we're going to talk about today, Vinny. So don't get too ahead of yourself. But
no, honestly though, it was a great win yesterday. Yeah. I know, given the circumstances, they didn't have their head coach or their best player, but nevertheless, that was a good win, and they needed to win because they lost that game, then it would be a dumpster fire.
Ooh.
That would have been bad if you lose to a team that doesn't have their head coach or their best player. And there's obviously
talk about dumpster fire. I mean, that would be really tough.
Yeah, and there's obviously there was a lot of good coming from a win, but there's still some things that the team needs to improve on, and still some of the same tendencies that I think has been holding this team back a little bit. But yeah, overall yesterday that was just. You can't really be upset following a victory on Sunday, especially a much needed one.
Yeah, and hey, I'm right here with Vinny. I'm glad the Niners finally got another win. You know, they started off those first two games great. Obviously, two teams they should have beat in the first place, and two teams if they didn't beat, things look a lot worse than they do right now. But still, you got to give the 49ers credit. You know, they go on a 4-game losing streak. Even though they lost 3 games that they probably should have to really good playoff type caliber teams, they did just lose to the Colts before this. So it's important for them to get this win ahead of this really tough 2-game stretch, which isn't as tough as we think it's going to be now, with Kyler Murray going to be out for next week versus the Cardinals. And really quick, Vinny, before we do get into the games today, why don't we talk about this? There was a huge trade that went down in the NFL. We didn't really acknowledge it yet. Von Miller was traded for a 2nd and a 3rd round pick to the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams, not only have they gone all in, Vinny, they're going as all in as any team has ever gone in the NFL. And they're starting to kind of break what we think of NFL teams thinking and acting very conservatively, not willing to trade draft picks, right? Not willing to invest huge capital all in one season. And, wow, I just don't think we've ever seen a team go all in like this.
Dude, no, I don't think so. And I honestly, as much as it pains me to say it, I respect it. I really do. Clearly the Rams have been on this agenda for years now of, not caring about draft picks and just wanting good players on their team. They're willing to do anything that it takes to get good players on their team. And you can respect the philosophy of trading what could be potentially good players versus known good players on your team. And, they've got 3 of the top 10, 15 defensive players in the league now, all on the same team. I mean, Von Miller, we already thought Aaron Donald was enough on that defensive line. And with Leonard Floyd, getting his time now, but you really want to leave one-on-one matchups with Von Miller now on the edge. That's going to be crazy. And again, I respect it. If you want to go get good players, go get them. And they're willing to, clearly the Rams are willing to take whatever consequences come their way. Yes, they've been doing this for years now, and we've been saying for years hey, they're going all in their future, they're screwed. But like, well, they haven't had a losing season under Sean McVay ever.
Yeah.
So, and their worst season was a 9-7 season. So it's like, it's a really bold move, and I think I'm interested to see if this makes it a Super Bowl or bust year for the Rams now, because they invested a lot in a lot of good players. Because this is only a 1-year deal, right?
Yeah.
So maybe the expectation is that they try and rework something going forward, to get them on maybe for a couple more years, but yeah, this is a big move by the Rams, and I respect the hell out of it.
Yeah, and with what they're doing over there in Los Angeles, I mean, like you said, I don't think you can give anything but respect to the Rams, because they're willing to do what the 49ers just weren't willing to do after they lost the Super Bowl. Like, both of these teams were in very similar spots, where you look in 2018, the Rams lose to a team that was just probably better than them. 49ers lost to a team that was probably just better than them the year after. And the Rams looked at their team and said, hey, we need to keep getting better. Look, we have Aaron Donald. We have some nice pieces on defense, but that doesn't mean that they had all the answers and that they were satisfied with what they had done. And that's kind of the issue, right? Is you look at comparatively to the 49ers, that Rams team is much better at self-assessment and recognition of where they needed talent in certain spots. And clearly they understood the value of adding a guy like Jalen Ramsey, right? They understood the value of Aaron Donald and surrounding him with other players who can pass rush and who can create pressure themselves. And they obviously went all in with Sean McVay this offseason. They traded for Matthew Stafford. And this is the kind of team building I think you just have to respect. And you would have hoped the 49ers were in this kind of position, but because of their own doing and because of the decisions that this team made, not bringing back certain people, just trading DeForest Buckner, trying to replace him with Javon Kinlaw, getting rid of Emmanuel Sanders, drafting Ayuk to replace him, instead of looking forward and looking at their team and saying, hey, we got a lot of good here, we can get even better, they looked at what they had and they said, we're satisfied and we want to repeat that. And I just can't understand that thinking still to this day. And to me, it's very clear that that's kind of the attitude of this team all along. So, there was that report from Ian Rappaport, right before the 49ers game, right before 1 o'clock Eastern time, Vinny, that they wanted the Patrick Mahomes, Alex Smith situation, and that they didn't think that's how it was going to go. So that just tells me that this is how this team has been thinking all offseason. And yeah, it's just interesting to see another team in the NFC West be so all in comparatively. And I'm with Pinor. I see you in the comments. I think the Rams are going to win the Super Bowl this year. I really think.
And to that point, I think they kind of have to, in a way. Like, because if they don't, then I think it is a bit of a disappointment.
So the thing is, next year they can still bring back some of those key pieces. They can bring back Donald, Ramsey, Von Miller, Matt Stafford, Kupp. They can bring back the core guys. You do lose some depth. Don't get me wrong. So
and they've already been losing. They've already been losing depth too, and it's just but it doesn't. The thing with the Rams is like it just doesn't matter. If they lose those depth guys, like you have the 2 best defensive players in the league on your team. Your defense is going to be top 10 at minimum, right? And you do have your quarterback for 2 more years, and after this year, right? Because I think it's a 3-year deal,
right?
And even with that, like Matt Stafford, clearly we've seen enough to know that this is all Matthew Stafford needed to prove. Like I think he's ahead in the MVP conversation, and I don't think anybody should be really shocked by that. But it's just, I think this is a boomer bust year for the Rams. I think it's a pretty disappointing. It depends who they lose to also. Like if you lose to the Bucs and Tom Brady, that's one thing. But like,
it's the
maybe
NFC
even the Packers a little
game.
bit. But like if say they play the Cowboys in the NFC Championship game and the Cowboys beat them, then no disrespect to the Cowboys are really good too. But like you made these moves to make it to the Super Bowl. Right. And you're going all in on this year. And the expectation then should be that they should be at least at the very minimum in the NFC Championship game. If they don't make the NFC Championship game, then I think it's
Oh
obviously
yeah,
a bust.
of course. And I think there's a realistic possibility that they could not make it to the Super Bowl. And I think funny thing is looking at the NFL today, how a team like the Rams, that if you look at that team on paper, right, I think if you transport this current Rams team to 2018, they might go undefeated and run the table. Like this is
Mhm.
one of the most talented teams I've ever seen put together. But the problem is that the rest of the league is still getting better along with that, right? People around the league in every single team, pretty much besides the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, got better one way or another. So year after year, teams are getting better, right? The 49ers, and this is where I want to bring it around, they didn't have that kind of attitude after 2019. It's what we talked about a minute ago, right? How they were satisfied with losing the Super Bowl. The Rams weren't. And this just goes to show you, you know, how that kind of thinking, where it brings you, because these two franchises really both had very similar opportunities to improve their teams, get their teams in better positions, or to repeat and do what they've already done. And what the Rams did was they said, no, we're going to get better. And what the 49ers said is, oh, 2019, perfect. That's what we want. And, you know, it'll be interesting moving forward to see if the Rams are able to cash in on that Super Bowl. But I don't think you can argue with this philosophy, Vinny. And I think this is the philosophy that we had hoped the 49ers would have had after losing the Super Bowl in 2019. But unfortunately, because of all the decisions they've made in the last 18 months since, this is kind of where they are now. And you can't do what the Rams are doing right now because don't, first of all, have the draft capital to do so. But then even if you did, you don't have the right quarterback to win right now. That's kind of where the 49ers
Yeah.
found themselves.
Yeah, and I think the last 2 years, real quick, have been, pretty humbling for them because I think you
Yeah,
look at
I
that
would hope
coming
so.
off. Yeah, you look at that 2019 season, and they were still a good team, but and then you talk about, like we talk about every year. It seems like with the injuries that happen at certain points, and it's just it's not that easy to go to the Super Bowl. This isn't the NBA, like when the Warriors were good and like from 2015 to 2020 or 2019, right? Like you're not going to be like, you can't just get all of the best players on your team and you're going to like be the standout favorite every single year, right? And I think they learned that in 2019, but they also learned that with the 2020 draft, I think, right?
Yeah,
It's not that easy to replace DeForest Buckner.
no.
And it's not easy trying to trade up for more capital for another receiver who, to your credit, you picked a good receiver there on the guy that you traded up for, but you didn't necessarily have to do that
Uh-uh.
if your receiver that you drafted beforehand was the right guy, and I think even a little bit in the 2019 draft, like I think the NFL is a very humbling business. And I think you see that with, there's not, and this has been said before, there's not a bad team. There's not a bad player in the NFL. Not one, in my opinion. There is never a bad player in the NFL. It's just there's a lack of consistency within teams, which is why some are worse than others. And I think that's what makes it so humbling for the 49ers. It's that, you can have all the talent in the world, but if it's not coming together, because we talk about it every year, this is going to be their year. They have all the talent in the world and one of the more talented rosters in the league, and they can be a team that's really going to compete. But if you're not executing and like if you're, shoot yourselves in the foot, which I think the 49ers do a lot, then it's going to, eventually going to bite you in the butt over time. And so hopefully this is, the last years have been a humbling thing. And I think you can see some of the improvements from the humbling, like, right? Like the move for Trey Lance. And who
Yeah.
knows, maybe eventually we're hoping obviously that it's the right move, but what if it's not? Then that's where the dominoes all fall eventually. And, moves will be made. Obviously not with the players, but like with like the coaching and the GM and everything like that. But, it's definitely something that, the team can learn from. And I think they are learning from some of their mistakes more now than what they did having that complacency, not just after 2019, but for that full 2020 season as well.
Yeah, I agree with that point for sure, Vinny. And I didn't want to. We don't want to spend too much more time on this because it was a really interesting trade this morning. Obviously, it's fun to talk about the Niners in terms of that 2019 perspective, comparative to the Rams, because it's interesting how these two different franchises have gone and kind of diverged. But we do need to talk about what happened this weekend, Vinny. The 49ers won. It's Victory Monday.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this victory over the Bears. So, first of all, this is Jimmy Garoppolo's best game since 2019. I think that's very clear and obvious. But I want to start with this point, Vinny, that this game doesn't change my opinion of what we've seen from this team so far. Does it reaffirm some of what I already thought? Sure, but this didn't show me that Jimmy Garoppolo is better than I thought he is. He's exactly who I thought he was, and if anything, this is the kind of game that feels like sort of a get right game for Shanahan, hopefully. And you hope for the rest of the season that they've figured out this offensive identity because, really, I think going into that bye week, even after this past game against the Colts, didn't seem like this team had an offensive identity almost at all. And now they do. They will run the ball. They're going to play through Debo. And they're just going to use that quick execution. And the one thing that I thought was really important to this victory yesterday more than anything was with Jimmy Garoppolo, I think outside of that one Debo Samuel play, right, the screen, you take away those yards, the stats don't look as good as they might look at the regular box score. But he did play very well. And the fact that he was willing to try and at least stretch the ball downfield while there was only really the one connection, I believe. You got to commend him for willing to push the ball downfield because I think it was something before where Jimmy didn't have any confidence in attempting balls more than 20 yards downfield. And that to me is something that's hugely important to this offense because you have to keep teams and defenses specifically, you have to keep them honest. You can't just let them play underneath and sit on Jimmy Garoppolo all day and let linebackers try and intercept him. Of course, there was a drop interception against the Bears, but I mean, other than that, it's a clean game from Jimmy Garoppolo. It wasn't the most efficient from him necessarily, but overall, very good. Elijah Mitchell played very well. Like we talked about right before the show, Vinny, Brandon Ayuk even got involved a little more this game. So overall, what do you see from the 49ers offense? What do you think from Jimmy? And do you feel like they're starting to at least get some sort of identity here?
Yeah, I think so. And to your point too, I think this game has more to say about how, more about Kyle Shanahan than I think it does for Jimmy Garoppolo. And I think, Kyle Shanahan had talked about, everyone in the building had their backs against the wall. Jimmy maybe being the most with his back against the wall. And I don't think he's ever going to admit it. Kyle Shanahan's was back to the wall was, the most prevalent, I think. And, you saw that and you saw a little bit of that in the second. I think they really started to pick up in the second half. And you started to see like, okay, this is what the Niners should be looking like week in and week out. And again, to Jimmy's credit, I thought he played really well. Again, and I know I talked about earlier, they didn't have Khalil Mack, their best defensive player. I think Eddie Jackson got hurt during the game as well. I think their safety, Eddie Jackson is their safety, right? He's not a corner.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Because I thought one of their corners going into the week was hurt too.
It was Kyle Fuller, I believe. Right?
Yeah, Kyle Fuller. Yeah. I think so. And but regardless of that, the Bears still have good defensive players, and even though they missed their head coach, their defensive coordinator is still there. And I think, with that, I thought Jimmy did what he needed to do, and maybe the adrenaline of having his family out there, having 100 friends and family out playing in his home city, kind of added to how he played. But I think, I think he still played really well. And to your point, I don't think the thing that, I learned from this game and that I think they proved to me or reaffirmed is that it was one play in particular, and it was the Elijah Mitchell touchdown. And you see all 11 guys push Elijah Mitchell in, and you see, the comments in the locker room. You mentioned this in your tweet. You saw the locker room after the game. This team still has fight, and gonna go out and it's gonna go, work every single week. And I think the players still do want to play for Kyle Shanahan. I know there was maybe some questions about that, but I think you could see the fight in this team, and it was just all reminiscent of one play. And I think, this team still believes, and, we'll maybe get into the trade deadline a little better. Maybe they try to make some moves to, put themselves in that position going forward to, fight for, a higher playoff seed than a 7 seed. But overall, you like to see the offense and them move the ball, especially with the running game. Like you mentioned, Elijah Mitchell was outstanding yesterday. And that's without George Kittle, who they get back this week. So that's just another little wrinkle that Kyle Shanahan will get to add. And, heading into this week against Arizona without Kyler Murray, it looks like it's going to be, another big opportunity for this team to really step up and, get to that, 500 mark heading into that Rams game.
Yeah, and that Rams game is going to be a really important game here, obviously. I don't think it's going to be the best matchup, but it's going to be really important for this team. The one thing I wanted to mention just off what you said was, I don't think that Bears defense, I think people are maybe giving it a little more credit than they deserve. They were playing without Khalil Mack. That linebacker core is really the only strength of that Bears defense at all anymore. And they just if you really dive deep into the stats and you look at them without Khalil Mack and how they've been affected and how good this defense actually is, they have a really good player, but I'm not sure this is a really great defense or even a really good defense that the 49ers played. But I think for the 49ers to put up 33 points on any defense in this time of the season is a huge accomplishment considering what they've been going through recently.
Yeah, and those linebackers are good, and I think his name is Akeem Hicks, that D-tackle. He's still
D-tackle.
Yeah, D-tackles are pretty good, and Robert Quinn had a couple big plays yesterday as well, so you can see that, and of course, to your point, any team is going to be worse without its best player, especially under defense, especially when it's
Khalil Mack. Khalil Mack. The difference between having Khalil Mack and not having Khalil Mack for the Bears is just night and day. It's not just for any team missing their best player. He was the Bears defense along with Robert Quinn this year, because if you look at it, the only thing that they've been able to do well, because they can't cover at all, is they can rush, and they can rush somewhat well. And when they do rush well enough, they can create enough pressure where they disrupt teams. But that doesn't necessarily, the Khalil Mack and Robert Quinn creating pressure to put quarterbacks on the grounds. That beyond that, this defense hadn't accomplished much. And that's why I think this should have been a walk in the park for the 49ers. And that's why I kind of keep getting back to this whole thing of don't judge the 49ers too harshly one way or the other after this game. I'm not trying to be hard on them. I might not sound super optimistic about them, but it's because this is a team, again, like those first two games against Philadelphia and Detroit, that you really feel like not just a must-win game in terms of, obviously people were talking about Shanahan's job. They were on a bad lose streak, all that, right? But this is the type of team that if you don't beat this team, you're just not a good football team. And 49ers desperately needed this one, in my opinion, Vinny. I'm glad they got it, certainly. But I'm also not as encouraged by this win as I don't think the rest of the 49ers fan base is right now. And the reason being is that, again, like what we've been saying,
they should have won. They should have won this game.
They should have won this game, and they should have been up more at the half, and it should have been more of a convincing win if the 49ers are as good as some 49ers fans think they are. And it's kind of the thing, obviously, you get back to is some fans are just very passionate about their team, and they really want their team to do well. But I think what we've learned over these first 8 games, Vinny, is this football team isn't quite as good as we thought they were, but they're not a bad football team. They're just not a very good football team.
Yeah, and I'm not really shocked to see this record, honestly.
No,
I mean, 3-4.
Either.
I mean, obviously, you look at the one loss against the Colts. Maybe they should be 4-3, but
maybe.
And that's just it's just how the way it works. And again, who knows if Kyler Murray plays this? If Kyler Murray doesn't play this week, this is a should-win team for this 49ers team. If Kyler Murray doesn't play.
Yeah,
and I get it. They still have some good players. You got AJ Green, DeAndre Hopkins, Zach Ertz now, all those good players. But
no,
I don't even know. I couldn't name you
the.
Is Brett Hundley their backup still?
So it is actually going to be Chase Daniel, I believe.
Okay, all right.
Sorry, Colt McCoy. Colt McCoy is the backup. I'm getting my backups confused, but
that's my point. Like, who cares about the backup? Like, why does it they're all the same at one point, right?
Hey, dude, you're not playing backup quarterback bingo this year? Like,
no, ew. Unless your backup quarterback is Trey Lance or
Justin Fields,
Taysom Hill, you know what I mean?
Guys.
Everyone else, it's just but yeah, they should. If Kyler Murray doesn't play this week, they should win. And then, like we talked about before, I think looking at it before the Kyler Murray injury, going 3-2 heading into that Rams game, I think would have been big.
And Pino, I mean, he's right there with us. This game, I'm kind of with him. It's like, if you don't win this upcoming game against Arizona, then what was this Bears win for? To delay trading people at the deadline? Like I understand that 49ers fans, take all the wins you can get, but this win isn't consequential in terms of anything for the 49ers. Now, I mean, obviously adds to their win-loss record, but this team is who we thought they were. Let's talk about a few players, though, because I think there are some really cool positives to take away from this game. The first, I think, huge positive, and the player who played really well, we've been kind of waiting more from, is Elijah Mitchell, a 6th-round pick out of I don't even know which college he went to. I believe it was a Louisiana Lafayette, something like that. But Elijah Mitchell, man, what a running back. And I know at the beginning of the season, everyone talked about the loss of Mostert immediately as that happened. You talk about how huge that is. And it's kind of funny because some people, those same people will also tell you before the season that, it's just the system. Mostert, yeah, he's pretty good, but it's all Kyle's system, right? Today, Kyle showed his system out, and Elijah Mitchell thrived in that. And specifically, you look at some of those tosses that they were running, some of those counters that they were running with Elijah Mitchell, the way that they're able to get him into space with those quick, easy decisions, right? He can just hit the ground running. And that's the great part with Elijah Mitchell. I think when you watch him is that he hits those holes quick, maybe a little too quick even, but he gets downfield about as fast as any 49ers running back. And I think that's really the thing I love about watching Elijah Mitchell behind this line is I feel like he's a nice scheme fit, specifically, Vinny, but I also feel like he's testing Kyle Shanahan in a way where he can't do his normal vanilla sort of run game. Not that Elijah Mitchell couldn't do some of those sort of things, but I think by forcing Kyle to get a little creative with it, he's really embraced a guy like Elijah Mitchell. And now Elijah Mitchell is a guy that they could run him 15, 20 times a game per season. And as long as he can stay healthy, it seems like the 49ers have a very good feature back who they can rely on.
Yeah. And I think it's starting to look like it's obviously starting to look like a steal. I think, at that 6th-round pick, I think I saw something that he has only 26 less yards than Najee Harris, and he's played 2 less games. So I think that's something that you really need to take note of. And I kind of talked about it a little bit. It seemed like Elijah Mitchell was going to be Mostert's replacement. And I think starting to put, Elijah Mitchell in some of those situations that Mostert's been in, in terms of the play calling, I think that's only going to help him. And, he's gotten better every single week. And I think that's something you really can, take and appreciate, especially for a 6th-round pick. And I still think his vision and his patience isn't like Mostert, but I mean, that breakaway speed is still, really good.
And that's what I meant by my my comment earlier, Vinny, is that I think Kyle just has to get a little more creative with it, right? You can't do exactly what you did for Mostert, but I think if you get him moving on the outside more, more of those tosses, even throwing some end around, some jet sweeps, get a little, let him work in space. That's where I feel like Elijah Mitchell has been really successful for this 49ers team.
Yeah, and like what I mentioned I think last week or heading into the bye, what do you want to see from the offense? They started running behind Trent Williams, and
Absolutely.
what a shocker, right? You run behind your best offensive lineman, good
You
things
do
are going to
really
happen.
well, yeah.
Yeah, and I imagine what they'll be able to do. Charlie Warner's been doing really well, like blocking and run blocking.
Oh, yeah.
And he got a couple, catches, and he's seen some improvement. But imagine putting Kittle and Trent Williams both on the left side, and running on that end with Juszczyk as your lead blocker. Like that's going to be something that they could really use to their advantage. And yeah, it looked like you saw some remnants of the 2019 49ers run offense in
Yep.
that game,
And
and
I
which
think
is a
that was
very
the hope from
promising sign.
Kyle. Yeah, that was the hope from Kyle, really, because we hadn't seen that this season so far, Vinny. And that's what kind of I feel like the one thing Kyle hasn't done at all up until this point is establish the run in that kind of way where you don't have to rely on Jimmy Garoppolo to make every single play or even just your quarterback in general or the pass game. But Vinny, one thing I did want to talk about with Elijah Mitchell, and I see it in the comments here, so I want to bring this comment up, is it's great that Elijah Mitchell's playing well, but clearly 49ers just proved to themselves in this game why they wasted a third-round pick and draft capital on Trey Sermon. Elijah Mitchell and Khalil Herbert, both sixth-round picks, they're the exact reason.
Dope.
Oh, did I lose you, Vinny?
No. You were just stuttering a little bit. You're good now.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think it cut out for a second, but I think we're back. But
Yeah,
what I was getting at was that Elijah Mitchell, Khalil Herbert, right, the two running backs who were starting yesterday for the respective teams, are the exact reason why you don't go and trade up for a guy like Trey Sermon. It's because as much as you love a certain running back, you shouldn't draft them in the first 2 days of the draft. And you're really just wasting draft capital if you are doing so. And I thought Kyle Shanahan learned his lesson with this with Joe Williams already. But, fool me once, fool me twice. Like, I don't know, fool Kyle 3 times. How many running backs is it going to take before they realize how much value they can get out of these guys they have to spend basically nothing on? It's frustrating.
Yeah, it definitely is. And, it'll be interesting to see what happens when Jeff Wilson Jr. comes back, because I think he's expected to be back coming up soon. And he is a pretty decent running back for this team. Where does that put Trey Sermon on the depth chart? And but I think there still is something there with Trey Sermon. Yeah, it's year one, and he hasn't gotten that much playing time, but especially for a third-round pick, you would expect him to get a little bit more PT. But maybe it's just a development thing. Maybe he's not at the point.
Yeah, well, I think the more concerning thing, Vinny, is that when every other running back was down and they had the perfect opportunity to just give him some more carries, they didn't even trust him to do that. Not even be a feature back for a game, because let's just get past that. They played him a lot in that Seattle game, but beyond that, how many times did they give Trey Sermon the carries that they should have been giving him? I mean, they did lose Mitchell for a long time. They didn't have him. He was hurt. He was in and out, or he was dealing with that shoulder thing. And obviously, they haven't had Mostert since week 1. So I'm sorry, there's zero. I don't feel like there's any excuses left for a guy like Trey Sermon. It feels like the 49ers have had every opportunity to play him, and maybe they don't trust him so far, Vinny. But guess what? If they don't trust him, then that's on whoever drafted Trey Sermon or decided to go up and make that pick.
Mm-hmm.
It's just tough. It's a really tough look for the 49ers, obviously. The one player I also wanted to talk about from this game, Vinny, is let's talk about Brandon Ayuk a little bit. Obviously, this is a huge game for him, it feels like, even though 4 catches, 45 yards, not a huge game by any means, but I think the further we got into the season, the more I realized how much of a bad mix of skill set Jimmy Garoppolo and Brandon Ayuk are. And the fact is that even though the 49ers should have been getting Brandon Ayuk a lot more involved, especially at the line of scrimmage, because there's so many easy ways to just manufacture touches with him, they just don't work well together. And I think this offense and Jimmy in specific with the offense is really just, I want to say Brandon Ayuk's kryptonite, but it's just not the right team for Brandon Ayuk to exactly be on right now. And I really think, once they move to Trey Lance at some point, hopefully, you kind of just need someone who's not just going to stretch the field more than a couple times a game, right? You need someone who's going to be willing to take those deep shots often, and they're going to be dialed up a lot. And that's where I think Brandon Ayuk can thrive. And that's kind of the problem so far, right? Is that it feels like Jimmy Garoppolo just isn't the right quarterback for Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah, and that's something I think I mentioned a little bit earlier, either on here or with Nate's podcast. It's I think that combination of Trey Lance and Brandon Ayuk suits Brandon Ayuk more than Jimmy Garoppolo and Brandon Ayuk. And it's interesting to see because, Ayuk saw all these numbers with Nick Mullins and CJ Beathard, but with Jimmy, it isn't the same. So it could be a chemistry thing. Maybe that's where maybe you can make an argument. Was there ever a doghouse in the first place? Like, it's not that Kyle Shanahan didn't want to get him the ball, or maybe he wasn't doing as well as what he thought because he did have some drops in the preseason. But like, maybe just because of there's just a lack of trust with his quarterback that he can't get those throws. But I think yesterday, yeah, you mentioned him being the second most targeted player. I think that's what should be expected, especially with no George Kittle. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out with Kittle coming back next week and how if he gets less targets, more targets, around the same, who knows? But I think it's seeing him get more targets and seeing the production that he had is very much a promising sign. He had a pretty good punt return yesterday as well, so that always helps.
He did. Yeah, and with Ayuk moving forward, I think the hope is really just that you hope he doesn't disappear in this offense like he did the first 6 games of the season, right? Where it felt like even if he was getting involved in the game, which wasn't often at all, he just wasn't a part of the game plan. And the 49ers didn't design their offense around, not just entirely, but not even some part of it around what Brandon Ayuk does well. And that's where, last season, you saw them do everything that they could possibly to just get him the ball. It didn't matter how they got him the ball. And specifically, you brought up Nick Mullins, CJ Beathard. With those guys, yeah, they're not going to be as accurate as Jimmy. They're not going to be as efficient as Jimmy, but they're going to be trying to push the ball downfield, push it downfield often. And I think that's the difference that we're seeing right now is when Brandon Ayuk plays with a quarterback who plays everything underneath, defenses know what he's doing, and that doesn't play well to Ayuk's skill set, obviously. It's just a mix for a bad game plan, and I just think they're both in a tough position where they just won't work well together because their skill sets don't match up in that sort of way where, Beathard and Nick Mullins aren't Jimmy Garoppolo, but their skill sets are much more conducive to Brandon Ayuk being successful.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And it's again, it'll be interesting to see his development going forward if it's been impeded at all because of the lack of targets. But by no surprise again, things are better when you get Brandon Ayuk the ball in his hands, and especially when you're switching off between him and Deebo Samuel. It's going to cause a lot of defenses, regardless of who their corners are, whatever defense it is. It's going to cause those defenses some problems.
Yeah, and who would have thought, getting Ayuk involved? Crazy, right? Let's talk about a few more things before we get out of here, Vinny. There's some really exciting things to talk about because this time tomorrow, trade deadline is approaching. It's very, very close. Let's start with this, though, Vinny. I think you look up and down the 49ers roster. I don't think they're going to be trading away many players. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't make any trade. But I think, let's play shadow GM here for a little while. Let's talk about some players that the 49ers should consider trading. And, Vinny, I have a list of players I want to go through with you. You tell me what you think. First of all, I want you to tell me if you think the team is going to trade this player, and then if they should trade this player. So let's start first with the guy that I think really should be in consideration for this position more than anyone else. And I know the 49ers are certainly putting a lot of thought, time, and effort into it. Should the 49ers trade Jimmy Garoppolo, Vinny?
I mean, yeah, I think so. I just don't know how much better value you can get for him in the offseason.
Yeah,
Like,
and
if
let me talk through
Yeah.
this, Vinny, because I want to point something out that we just saw today, right? Von Miller got traded for a second and a third round pick. Von Miller isn't worth that right now, considering he's an impending free agent. Part of the big reason that the Rams have been doing this is because there's zero cap space involved. They're taking on $700,000 right now. It's not going to affect their cap moving forward. So if you're the 49ers and your cap is already set in place basically for the season, right? I think it might be a smart move to just eat Jimmy Garoppolo's contract, because it seems like that's what they're stuck with no matter what, and get the best draft pick possible you can. I really think that's the only way to squeeze value out of this situation.
Yeah, because there's teams that need quarterbacks right now. You look at New Orleans now.
New Orleans
needs a quarterback. Do you really trust Trevor Siemian? Do you really trust Taysom Hill? I don't know. Pittsburgh could use a quarterback, potentially. If you're looking at, maybe moving on from Big Ben for whatever reason, or for the future, even.
Houston. You could talk the Houston Texans into this.
Yeah, Houston Texans. That's another team. Davis Mills, he's all right, but do you want to have more, especially given the lack of quarterback talent in the draft next year? There are going to be Washington, right? Like, there are going to be teams that are going to be looking for quarterbacks more so via trade than, say you don't get Desmond Ridder, or people originally thought maybe God, what's the Oklahoma kid's name?
Spencer Rattler.
But Spencer Rattler's not as good anymore. They're what you thought, right? So,
and right now it looks like there's only one true first round quarterback, the kid out of Liberty, Malik Willis. So that's pretty much it right now.
So it's like the quarterback class isn't this good last year. There are teams now that need quarterback play and decent ones. Like, the Saints are still in the playoff contention if they have Jimmy Garoppolo as their quarterback. Exactly. And like you mentioned, Carolina, maybe
they're not satisfied with Sam Darnold.
They're like, oh crap, Sam Darnold, maybe we messed up here. Maybe you look at that. So there are definitely teams that could use him. So, and what's the max you could get out of him? Maybe you get, I don't know if they could get a second round pick, but say you get a third and a fourth.
I think a second or a third isn't unreasonable, especially if they put conditions upon those picks. I think everybody too often gets caught up in the big picture, the macro of the trade, right? The Adam Schefter tweet, this player for this amount, right? Or this player for this draft pick. Often there's a lot more going on behind the scenes to where the value is so much more different. Like the Von Miller example, right? The Rams aren't paying him anything this year, and he is completely free of the books for them from here on out. So for them, giving up a second and third round pick is man, that's a no-brainer. Like, really, I'm surprised, in fact, that the Broncos didn't get more in that situation. But I think 49ers should consider trading Jimmy. I probably would trade Jimmy, but it's just a matter of how much can you get out of it. And if a team offers you a third or a second, and you're taking that salary, right, and you're just getting rid of it, I really like that situation. I just wonder how much they can actually get out of him in that situation.
Yeah, because you understand that this is a future thing with Trey Lance, and you need to get him reps. And
you don't want him making those rookie mistakes next season, right? That's the point, Vinny, that I think everyone is kind of coming around on is you want Trey Lance to do the best possible, he can do. But in order for him to do that, you're going to have to get him reps now rather than later because he needs to make those mistakes so that he can learn and get better and be a much more polished quarterback by the time your team is a lot better in a few years, right? That's what we're trying to accomplish here.
Mm-hmm.
So,
definitely.
Let's talk about some more players. Another player. Let's talk about Mike McGlinchey. I wanted to talk about him specifically because I think you look at the 49ers offensive line, right? They have their left tackle of the present, future, and the rest of time and Trent Williams, right? He is there. There is no way you are getting rid of him. But they also have a backup left tackle who is playing very well, Jalen Moore. And it looks like I think you should try and move him over to another position. I think if you're the 49ers, you look at Mike McGlinchey, you look at Laken Tomlinson, if you feel you can plug Jalen Moore into that spot, you should really consider trading both of those players, especially Laken Tomlinson, because, I think the 49ers drafted Jalen Moore with the intention of starting him next season when they lose Laken Tomlinson in free agency, right? So if there's a team that's in the playoff race that needs a left guard, and with Laken Tomlinson being a free agent this offseason, I think you should really trade him if you can. Get what value you can now, and then start playing your left guard of the future if he is that guard. But if you think you can move him over to right tackle even, I think this is a prime time to cash in on Mike McGlinchey's value, specifically because you're not paying him his fifth-year option yet. You haven't gotten him to the point where he's so expensive that he's being paid more than the average tackle. And, for the 49ers, they need with them paying Trent Williams so much and with the way they disperse money, draft capital, and assets, you do need to be cheaper at some spots compared to others. So I don't think they could keep Mike McGlinchey and Trent Williams and then figure out the rest of the line. So do you think they should trade maybe Tomlinson or McGlinchey? Am I crazy here, Vinny?
I think like you mentioned, I think teams could use either one of those players. I just I don't know if they will. Just because like that's where I think I talked about the Jalen Moore signing earlier as the potential McGlinchey replacement. Say he doesn't play like astronomically, like bad like he did last year. Like last year was a bad year for him. And like if he were to be in this situation again this year, maybe like logically it makes sense to maybe make that move for Jalen Moore. I didn't know as much about Jalen Moore coming out of college. I didn't know like if he had guard experience. So maybe that's if he does have that guard experience, maybe you try to maybe you can put him in at that left guard. But you don't want to find yourself in a Daniel Brunskill situation where you're trying to play a left tackle at a guard and it's not, and it like a swing tackle as a guard and it doesn't work. So that's where I think if I were to pick one, it makes more sense to trade McGlinchey than it does for Laken Tomlinson, just because at least it's a tackle position and you can, fill in a little bit better. But yeah, I think both will be on the team after the trade deadline tomorrow, and like McGlinchey's played well too, so it's like it's not something that they really need to, but maybe it's similar to Jimmy. Maybe they look to try to trade him as high as they can, and then maybe get something out of it, because like I said, there's always going to be teams that need offensive linemen.
Yep, and there's certainly playoff teams who need a Mike McGlinchey type guy, right? So I think in terms of getting the value out of him, I could certainly see the 49ers getting good enough value to justify that kind of trade, because he is your second best offensive lineman right now, right? And it's tough to just let go of that player. But I think considering everything, the 49ers should really think about it. A few more players I want to talk about. First, let's talk about DJ Jones. So DJ Jones, I think prior to the Kinlaw injury, this is one that I was circling, and I think the 49ers should really have done, honestly. But Vinny, after everything that's happened and the lack of depth that they really have at that defensive tackle, do you think the 49ers should trade DJ Jones? Because the situation they're in, right, is that He's a free agent this offseason. He's probably surely going to leave unless they really make an effort to try and keep him. So do you feel like that risk is worth enough for 49ers to justify not trading him? Because right now they have every reason in the world to trade a guy like DJ Jones.
I don't think they can though.
That's the
Just
thing,
'cause
right?
I don't think they can. And honestly, I don't think they should, because I think he's, one of the best defensive linemen on the team, honestly. And especially with Javon Kinlaw going down, you need DJ Jones. And maybe Armstead playing him more inside will help, and maybe getting more time for Jordan Willis.
But they don't have the depth we thought they had at that position.
Yeah,
I mean, they really don't. The Contavious Street hasn't played that well. I think beyond DJ Jones and Eric Armstead,
it's
there's
like
not much there.
Givens and Zach Kerr, and we haven't seen much from them. Hurst went down. I think, I don't think you can afford to trade DJ Jones, because he's one of your better defensive players, especially on your defensive line. And, he could be a guy, if he doesn't get the money that he wants next year from a team, maybe he comes back to the Niners on a cheaper deal. And having that familiarity in that system would help him. So maybe he does.
And who knows? Maybe he loves Chris Kosaric, and maybe he does want to be here long term. And this is a place he feels like he can thrive at, right? But I just think it's a consideration that the 49ers have to make given the position they're in. But I want to talk about the one player that I feel like 49ers fans have really collectively come around that they want to trade this player. Let's talk about Dre Greenlaw, because I think Azeez Al-Shaair has been playing himself to the point where he's making this a real conversation where the 49ers, I think, need to very seriously consider trading Dre Greenlaw. And I just wonder, in that scenario, Vinny, first of all, do you think they are considering that? And if they were to, what kind of value do you think you're getting out of a guy like Dre Greenlaw at this point?
I think it's a lot harder to say given his injury that he's coming off of. But looking at how well Al-Shaair has played, I think, and like Flanagan Foles, I think was decent yesterday. Like, he wasn't great at all.
And Marcel Harris filled in.
Yeah, like, you got guys that can fill in for those spots, but Dre Greenlaw, he's not a bad player, and I think he is a starter on this team. But it's just, has Al-Shaair done enough over this period of time to say that you're willing to move on from him and saying that he's going to be that guy for the rest of, like, because then you need to invest in Al-Shaair more than you need to invest in Greenlaw. And maybe like a third or a fourth they can maybe get out of him. He's drafted as a 5th round pick. He's played better than a 5th round pick, in my opinion. So maybe that's where the value comes in. But I think they're thinking about it. I think they say they're looking at all options, and I think they do, like looking at the trade as some of their guys. So I think it may not be like, I don't think there could be a situation where they don't do anything, but I don't think they're not being like inactive during this trade deadline. I think they're listening to offers, and I think Dre Greenlaw could be one of those first names that teams could be looking to have, because he does make big plays. There's a reason why he's called Big Play Dre, and so that's where I think maybe they're listening, but I don't know if they'll make that move.
Yeah, and in terms of how active the 49ers are at the trade deadline, I wanted to wrap up the trade talks with this, because I think it's interesting that, this team hasn't really been ever as active as we think they are, because often you'll see reports, Vinny, that, they were all in on Odell Beckham Jr. and they got second, right? Or, they were all in on this player or this player or this player. Will some of that come out after the trade deadline? I'm sure. But like, the thing that would really surprise me is if the 49ers were going to make a trade at this point. I just don't think they're that team that makes trades at the deadline like that, unless they feel they absolutely have to, with the Emmanuel Sanders situation, right? You look back a few years where, like, what the Rams just did today, to a lesser extent, of course, right? A win now sort of move where it's like, hey, we need this guy. He can really help us win right now. I just think the 49ers aren't in a position where they can very easily do that. And if you look at the front office and the regime and where they're at, even though they should make a move like trading Dre Greenlaw for like a 4th-round pick even, right? I just don't think that's the type of move that this organization makes because of the position that the decision makers are in. Even though I think in any other normal situation, you would be selling players like that. You would be considering DJ Jones, Mike McGlinchey. I just think because the front office is in the spot that they're in and they're as desperate as they are, I don't think they're just going to be willing to sell off players for good future picks, even though they should, right? Even though that might be the right decision, because that's not because that kind of decision is only something that shows up in the long term, right? Where you get to next year's draft or the draft after that, and you have 4 or 5 day 1, day 2 picks, right? Even though you might not have a 1st-round pick, like stuff like that. That's not the kind of thing that helps John Lynch or Adam Peters or Parag Marath right now. It's the thing that helps them in the future. But their problem is they have a lot of pressure on them right now. So I just don't know this organization is going to be willing to do the things that we think they should do, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I don't know if they're really in a position to do those things. And I think like it's just really hard to say because they're kind of in that middle ground of like looking for the future and looking to win now. And the one move that they made last year was trading Quan Alexander. I think, right? That was the one move that they made. And then like you mentioned, like you mentioned last week, they got Jordan Willis.
Right.
So it's like maybe you see a couple moves like that, but I don't know if there's not going to be any like blockbuster moves from this team. I don't think, unless they pull something out of left field and Jimmy Garoppolo's on a different team by tomorrow. Right, yeah, that would be the one where you're like, I think he'll be on the roster. I don't think he's getting traded, and
I do too.
It's just, I'm not expecting much activity, and maybe they're looking into the offseason using the capital that they have and the money that they have to try and snag some of these top tier free agents. Maybe that's what they're looking forward to, but we'll see how it all plays out.
Yeah, we will for sure. And I want to end on this, Vinny. Let's talk about this Cardinals game coming up for the 49ers. It's going to be a weird preview because, quite honestly, there's a lot of information that we just won't have and be able to predict, of course, because it's Monday. But one thing does seem pretty certain. It seems like there's a really good chance, if not an almost certain chance, that Kyler Murray is going to miss this game, Vinny. And, I'm really interested to see what this Cardinals offense looks like with Colt McCoy behind center, right? Because I think we attribute much of Cliff Kingsbury's identity to what Kyler Murray does. And that's because Kyler Murray is so dynamic and you have to design an offense that does what he does so well and the way they play spread. And of course, everyone knows about Cliff Kingsbury using as many wide receivers as humanly possible. I'm just going to be interested to see if they're going to run the ball more versus 49ers, right? I think this is a team that, honestly, even if they play their vanilla offense, could still really do some things against the 49ers. Now, against them a few weeks ago, they only scored 10 points. That was the, obviously they had Kyler in that game. It's going to be a little bit different, but I don't know. I still feel like this is a Cardinals team 49ers should really be fearing more than maybe 49ers fans will give this team credit for, even still.
Yeah, because there's still talent on this team. And, that's the question. And, I talked about the Bears still having their defensive coordinator. Vince Joseph has seen success against Kyle Shanahan. And, they don't have J.J. Watt this time around. But they still have some pretty good defensive players on their team. So,
absolutely.
In terms of, what the 49ers do on defense, if Kyler Murray's not the quarterback, do you take the risk of stacking the box, putting 6, 7, 8 guys in there? And do you leave, your receivers one-on-one on the outside with those corners? I don't know, right? Because those receivers are still good. And but at the same time, do you want to take away any other thing that would enhance the play of Colt McCoy and just say, hey, Colt McCoy, you beat us and you make these throws, right? Because the reality is that you are not going to be as mobile as Kyler Murray. You're not going to be making those plays, and that's something that they don't have to worry about. in terms of the 49ers defensive line. You don't have to keep contained as much, right? Like maybe he'll get his, extra little like 2-3 yard gains or whatever, but it's not Kyler Murray. And so do you take the risk of stacking the blocks and leaving those receivers on the outside, or do you play like you normally have and leave more space for those receivers? So that's where I think they really exploit them on defense, but on offensively, I think if they continue this groove, I think, especially being at home, they need a home win. They haven't had one in like a year.
No.
So I think this is a really good chance for the 49ers to win. And I think I could see them losing, but I think this should be a win for this team. If Kyler Murray doesn't
I agree.
Play. If he does play, then it's different. But
absolutely different story. But I think as things stand right now, the 49ers should win this game. And I think it would be an embarrassment if they didn't. And that's kind of what I want to get to, is that these are the type of games that if the 49ers are the team if they are who we kind of think they are, this is a game that they should win, and should win probably convincingly. But again, Vinny, this gets back to this whole theme I was talking about earlier, where I just think the 49ers aren't as good as we thought they really were. And I think we gave this team too much credit. And I feel like this is the perfect test where, you're playing against a really good overall team with a backup quarterback and a game you should win. But, this is the type of game that is set up perfectly for the 49ers to win. And if they don't take advantage of the situation and keep finding themselves where they have been these past 4 games right before this Bears game, this feels like maybe a trap game, Vinny. And I'm not saying that the 49ers will lose this game, but I think you can very easily get caught. Yeah, this is the type of game where if you don't take the Cardinals seriously enough, you could easily lose. So I want to see how seriously Kyle Shanahan takes this team and how seriously the 49ers take the Cardinals without Kyler Murray, because I still think this is a very good football team.
Yeah, especially with the Rams the following week.
Yeah.
That's something we talked about last time. They haven't even played the Rams yet.
Oh my God. And now you play the Rams twice with Von Miller. So good luck with that. I think that's going to be
still. Yeah. And real quick, they still have this is a really big game for them to take advantage of, because, looking at the schedule, they got Arizona obviously next week. The following week, they have, like I said, the Rams on Monday night. But then you have, I think, Jacksonville. Jacksonville.
Jacksonville, yes.
Then the Vikings at home, who just lost to Cooper Rush last night.
Yes.
Then I think it's the Seattle game. Seattle, potentially no Russell Wilson there. Who knows? I think he'll be back by then, but there's a shot that he's not there. And then you don't have to worry.
I was just going to say, Vinny,
go ahead.
You look at that. But you were just going to say, I think what you're saying with the rest of the schedule is that there are winnable games for the 49ers from here on out. And there are certainly a lot of games where I think they should have good opportunities to win versus teams. But then, you look at a game like that Vikings game right last night with Cooper Rush. To me, that's the kind of embarrassment the 49ers potentially face if they don't take this Cardinals game seriously and they don't take this team seriously. But I think that's where we're going to end today, everybody. I appreciate everyone sticking along. If you haven't already, look in the description below. All of Vinny's links are down there, his YouTube, his Twitter. Make sure you subscribe to his YouTube. You follow his Twitter. We'll be back next week, this time, 11:30 Pacific Standard. We're looking to have a guest next week, so stay tuned for that, guys. Appreciate your time, Vinny, as always, and I look forward to seeing everybody next time. Thanks for sticking around.
Peace out.